One of the things I love about Judges, really, I mean, obviously we read scriptures for these spiritual messages, but Judges is one of these great examples of ancient hero literature. Okay, it's like reading the Odyssey, it's like reading the Aeneid. It's just, there are these really neat stuff in there. And I guess the primary purpose, of course, for reading scripture is to bring us closer to God and help us have a better relationship with each other and with Jesus Christ. But there's value in recognizing that sometimes scripture can just be fun. And there's some cool stuff in here. But in terms of this notion of, the whole story, Samson is interesting, we will say.
Samson is unfortunately one of the greatest tragedies in my mind of the entire Old Testament. This guy who started with so much promise, so much capacity, and ended with so little, and yet the Lord still used him. Even in he broke every vow, every covenant, every promise that had been given to him and that he had made. He breaks them all, but at the end of the day, even in his lowest moment, God still uses him as an instrument to deliver Israel from the Philistines in this case.
And it's also worth noting, perhaps, kind of jumping to the end a little bit, but in his worst moment, his lowest moment, he also calls on God again.
He does.
That Samson's story actually ends with him asking God for help. And there may be value in seeing, because we kind of focus, he's kind of like this Hercules figure, right? He's big, he's strong, he's this golden boy. Actually, his name means like the sun guy, right?
Shemesh.
Shemesh is the root for Shemshon, Samson. So he's kind of, he burns brightly. He's like, again, he's almost presented in this kind of almost Greek demigod kind of way.
Hercules figure.
And his hair is almost like the rays of sunlight that bring power, which is symbolically why you don't cut the hair, because that is representative, the source of power. Like if you cut the rays of the sun, well, that no longer you have heat or light for the earth, the whole thing's destroyed. So really interesting things going on in this particular story.
So to introduce the actual beginning of Samson's story, now that we've kind of overviewed it, look at chapter 13, verse 1. Of course, we're skipping all of these other multiple stories.
And they're cool, so you should read them.
And so we're just skipping all of these, and we're going to go down to chapter 13, where it opens, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. I know, it was shocking. You didn't expect to see that coming there, but sometimes there's a plot twist, and there you go again.
Okay, and this is another, in terms of the narrative, right? Samson's kind of our last judge here. And suddenly we've had, these people, we've had the Aram Naharaim, we've had, Midianites, we've had generic Canaanites. Note here, the bad guys are the Philistines. Okay, this is going to be a major thing. They're a power that moves in to the coastal land. So Israel's real strength is in the center of what's now the Israel-Palestine, the land of Canaan then. The Canaanites are going to, they're probably part of the sea peoples, and they become a major issue as we move forward in the Bible.
And the Philistines are going to come up over and over and over again. Like he said, they're on that coastline of the Mediterranean Sea, where today maybe Gaza Strip and up towards northern parts of Israel, all along that coastline.
Yeah, although again, and part of it is the Philistines are technologically and culturally more advanced than the Israelites. And this is part of why there's so much tension. They're another growing power who have some skills that the Israelites don't. We see later on, the Philistines are able to work iron before the Philistines. This is transition between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and the Philistines bring iron working earlier than the Israelites have it.
So, verse 2, there was a certain man of Zorah of the family of the Danites. So now we're going to the tribe of Dan. Have you noticed a pattern in the book of Judges? That it's not one tribe is always the delivering tribe. It's these are coming from a variety of places.
And that's really useful because, of course, the authors of the Bible generally are Judahites. Okay, so Judah is kind of the lens through which the Old Testament and even the New Testament is written. But it's nice because it's a reminder that all Israel is part of this, and Judges give us some really great examples of tribes besides Judah doing things and helping out.
So the angel appears in verse 3 unto a woman who is, from verse 2, barren and bear not. And we see this throughout the Old Testament, is these stories of couples who are not able to have children. And as Avram said earlier, the land producing and a family being able to produce posterity, that's life for them. That's where they get their whole sense of being is, and survival is in these two realms.
Again, pragmatically, I mean, there aren't social nets and social structures in place. And so if you're going to be supported, you need children to support you. I mean, this is a very real economic and life necessity.
So Avram, at this point, it's fascinating because traditionally in our biblical narratives, we see heavenly visitors coming to the men, usually, is the traditional flow. In this case, who is it that comes and who gets visited?
So it's intriguing. So there's this figure, the angel of the Lord, Hebrew Malach Yahweh, Malach Jehovah, angel of Jehovah. And in the Old Testament, that means it's Jehovah. Okay, the angel of the Lord is the direct messenger. There's some evidence actually that these are textual additions, at least in some places, that it's actually Jehovah appearing. And it's key because we get the name of Manoah, but the angel, at least initially, or Jehovah himself, does not appear to Manoah, but to Manoah's wife, to Samson's mother. And this is really valuable because this is an example. She is able to receive revelation for herself. She is able to have that direct communication with God herself about her son Samson. And that's really important to highlight as we think through the scriptures. We saw something similar with Rebecca and things like that. There are other places, but it's really valuable that the Lord communicates with her.
He tells her, by the way, don't drink any strong drink, don't eat any unclean thing. Why? Verse 5, for lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. It's that idea of your child is going to be a great deliverer.
Now, a cultural thing, Nazarite is a special level of sort of covenant significance that you find in places in the law. You sort of dedicate yourself, usually for a short period of time, to the Lord as so you keep an even stricter version of the law. And here, you don't cut your hair or your face or your beard. You don't to actually touch anything from the grape, so not even raisins. It says very specifically, but no drink, so no alcohol. And you have even more specific rules about touching dead bodies. And the idea here is that Samson's going to keep these vows from when he's a baby upwards. And that's at least the idea of what that will sort of lead to his strength. We see actually, as Tyler kind of pointed to, he actually keeps none of them.
Yeah, he's going to cut himself off from every
that's cute.
every single connection that God has made with him. So in chapter 14, he's born at the end of chapter 13, and chapter 14 begins with him seeing a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. So one of the very, very strict laws of the law of Moses is marry in the covenant. Don't marry outside the family. So the very first thing, right out of the chute, the first introduction to this child of promise, this great deliverer, is he was down among the Philistines and he saw a woman that he really liked and wants to marry.
So, and of course, in 3, it talks, you see this, the first, the uncircumcised Philistines. And this is going to be, we see this a lot as narrative comes up. This one is the distinctive features of the Philistines. So one of the things, of course, for Abraham, circumcision is a sign of the covenant. And it's actually in the Abraham covenant, before it sort of changed in the Jerusalem Council, it's sort of the premier sign of the covenant between God. But the Israelites were not the only people in the ancient world who were circumcised. We have evidence the Egyptians did so. Many of the Canaanites, we have some Phoenician evidence. So the Israelites being circumcised isn't going to be weird outside of the covenant significance. But the Philistines are not a Semitic people. Neither the Egyptians, but they're not Canaanites. They're related to culturally and linguistically to Greeks and some of these things. And so the idea that they're not circumcised is, one, they're so far outside the covenant that they can't even. I mean, this is not just people. This is an alien people from the ancient Israelite perspective.
So he prevails on his mom and dad to go and take this daughter of the Philistines for him to marry her. And on his way, you get that story of him finding the carcass of the lion with the honey inside of the carcass, and he dips the stick in it and eats the honey.
Remember, as a Nazirite, he can't touch dead bodies. Okay? Other Israelites can. They are unclean and they wash themselves. As a Nazirite, he is not supposed to touch any dead bodies.
But there you go. And he, as part of this 7-day wedding ceremony and festivities, he puts out a riddle to them and says, hey, if you can solve my riddle, I'll give you this, and if you can't, you give me that. And so the riddle is in verse 14, out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. And thus begins this pattern in Samson's life where he's doing things that almost for him, for his gain, and it's for his sport and for his entertainment.
Samson saves Israel, but only accidentally, is kind of the way I would frame that.
Go.
And by the way, as a brief cultural aside, the prize is 30 sheets and 30 garments. And for us in the modern age with machine-made clothing, we're like, yay, you get clothes for this? But in an ancient world where every cloth had to be hand-woven and hand-sewn, this is a mighty, mighty prize. We find wills in the ancient world where they pass down clothing because it's so important, because you don't want to just, it takes so much to make clothing in the ancient worlds.
So these men who can't figure out his riddle keep going to his wife and begging her to figure out or to get from him the answer to the riddle, and then they threaten her. If you don't tell us the answer, we're going to do bad things to you. And so she pleads with him, and he tells her the answer on day 7, right at that final hour, and then they come and they tell him the riddle, and so his response is one of frustration. He goes down to Ashkelon. He slew 30 men of them and took their spoil.
So he's like, I'll get the clothing just to kill a bunch of guys and take. And by the way, Ashkelon is a Philistine city. So he takes in, again, this is sort of the accidental saving Israel. He kills a whole bunch of Philistines to give them the prize for that.
And so he then leaves, leaving his new wife behind, and her father gives the new wife to his friend. So this story gets very convoluted very quickly. So when Samson eventually goes back down to be with his wife again, he finds out that she's been given to another man. It makes him pretty upset. So his retaliation, it's so interesting that it's all selfishly motivated. At least it seems to be. It's all, what, you did that? So to get revenge, he takes 300 foxes, and what does he do?
He ties firebrands to their tails, torches to their tails, and sends them through their crops. He thinks it's probably this great, it's for revenge, it's this great prank on the Philistines as he runs he's like, I'm not destroying their crops, it's just the foxes, guys.
Well, the Philistines find out who has caused this great destruction among them, and they say, oh, it was Samson who did it, and he was married to her, and it was caused because her father gave her to somebody. So what do? The Philistines go and
they burn them. It's this kind of this let the punishment fit the crime kind of thing. It's pretty terrible, actually.
And so then you get Samson, who in response to that turns around and takes, the story says he takes the jawbone of a donkey, this jawbone of an ass, and he goes and he slays 1,000 Philistines. So then chapter 16, we find Samson going down to Gaza.
Another Philistine city.
And there he saw a harlot, and he went in unto her. And so all the Gazites, they said, oh, we've got Samson in here. Let's trap him, and in the morning we're going to kill him. But at midnight, verse 3, he rose, he took the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts, and went with them, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders and carried them up to the top of an hill that is before Hebron.
Hebron is miles and miles away from Gaza. This is the whole point is he's tearing this across half the land of Canaan to make his point about how cool he is.
And it's not just one part of the gate; it's the 2 posts and the bar and all that he's carrying on his shoulders. He is this Herculean figure in this story. Then verse 4, it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah.
Now, what's intriguing about Delilah is it's not, his previous wife, is very clear, was a Philistine. Delilah's not specified whether she's Philistine or Israelite. And the story works both ways, which is intriguing for us. So in verse 5, the Philistines come to her and they say, entice him. This is a different story if she's a Philistine or if she's an Israelite. And how you again, we don't know for a fact. The implication may be that she's Philistine, but the fact that the biblical author doesn't tell us means that there is intriguing ambiguity in this narrative, and which will affect how her reactions with it one way or the other. If she's a Philistine, then her reacting with the Philistines and sort of selling Samson out to Philistine makes a lot of sense. If she's an Israelite, it makes that betrayal even sharper when she sells him out to the Philistines. So after this whole thing in Gaza, Samson marries this woman Delilah, and she basically becomes a tool that the leaders of the Philistines use to try and get the secret of his great strength. And of course, I mean, the real secret is his covenant relationship with God, but that's symbolized by his Nazirite vow and by his hair. And so he finally goes, look, you hate me, right? Like, fine, it's my hair. They cut my hair, I'll have no strength. And obviously they cut his hair and he has no strength. They put his eyes out. It's kind of terrible. They make him, grind in the prison house. They put him to work, grinding grain for them and whatever, which, by the way, would have the effect of building his strength again. So that maybe not the best thing for them to have done. But then they had this whole thing, they had this great big feast where they're going to show off their prize Samson. And of course, this is that famous thing with Samson and the pillars. And I think it's really compelling for the first time in Samson's life. Here he is, he's blind, he's broken his covenant, everything's there, they're all there, they're making sport of him. In verse 28, and then Samson called unto the Lord, unto Jehovah, and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, that I may be avenged. Again, still for himself a little bit there, for these two eyes. Then he takes hold of the pillars, and he pulls the house down, taking himself, and it says over 3,000 Philistines with him. And he actually says he killed more than he had his entire life there. But for me, part of the reason, Samson's kind of a piece of work. He's kind of terrible in a lot of ways. But it's very compelling to me that even Samson, at his moment of extremity, calls on God, and God listens to him. I love that. God listens to Samson's requests. It's a good reminder to me that sometimes as we're caught in this cycle here, and we feel like, we're all down here, and God listens to us, when we call, God's going to listen. Even if the reason we were here was our fault, God still loves us and will still listen to us. God still loved and had called Samson and listened to his prayer. And that's powerful stuff, brothers and sisters.